I have 3 childhood playmates and I am the only girl among the 4 families. The family is in decline, and the elders are preparing a marriage alliance, wanting me to marry one of them. But the school bully Alex glanced at me with disdain and refused, saying, "I can't marry her, I like the obedient ones, I only see her as a brother." My younger brother Ethan shrugged regretfully, "I only see her as an older sister." The top student Ian coldly said, "She is reckless and foolish, not suitable to be my wife." Various rejections and belittlements, without any scruples, left my parents awkwardly smiling. I have completely given up hope. So, I told my parents, "Mom and Dad, I have a boyfriend now." Alex rolled up his sleeves, one arm draped over the back of the chair, sitting in a relaxed manner. He was laughing and chatting with Ethan, while Ian was looking down at his phone. His long fingers casually swiped across the screen, the light refracted by his glasses appearing cold and unapproachable. They both seemed impatient to listen to my parents' awkward attempts to smooth things over. Until I finished speaking that one sentence. The room suddenly fell silent. Alex and Ethan turned to look at me at the same time. Ian also raised his head, his meaningful gaze piercing through. I seemed oblivious. I simply said to my equally astonished parents, "You should have told me about the arranged marriage earlier to avoid this misunderstanding." They are right. Although we were childhood playmates, I only regarded them as brothers, without any romantic feelings. My parents were afraid I would be embarrassed, so they didn't tell me in advance that this was a matchmaking banquet. They carefully considered it. The target they chose was Ethan, who is almost 2 years younger than me, has a lively and clingy personality, and has never really argued with me. I just don't know why the other 2 ended up coming as well. Although I was a bit angry that my parents kept this from me, what I felt more was heartache and sadness. Our family situation wasn't as bad as it is now. My mother once asked me if I had someone I liked. I turned my face away and remained silent. In an instant, my mother understood. She smiled and tentatively asked me if that person was one of my 3 childhood playmates. I blushed and, in a fit of anger and embarrassment, told her to stop talking. She immediately understood, it was definitely true. However, I became cautious afterward, hiding my feelings tightly. They couldn't figure out who I actually liked. Until my dad's investment failed, and our family fortune continued to decline. The G family was completely down and out, becoming intentionally or unintentionally distanced from the other 3 families. My mom felt that if she didn't help me make a move, given my stubborn and prideful nature, I might never confess to the person I liked in this lifetime. So she took a bold step and secretly organized this blind date for me. Although Ethan's parents didn't come, Alex and Ian did. My parents still took it seriously. They opened up and talked about our family's current situation, saying that if I fell in love with someone among them, a marriage would naturally be the best outcome. But if we don't mean anything more than that, just a friendship, then let's treat this gathering as an ordinary meal. My parents won't insist any further. They just never expected that these 3 childhood friends, who grew up with me, would see their precious daughter, whom they held in the palm of their hands, reject them so ungraciously. I have actually gotten used to it. But seeing the increasingly strained smiles on my parents' faces, my heart was suddenly gripped tightly, and a long-forgotten pain surged within me. I couldn't help but interrupt their unpleasant behavior. Without waiting for my parents to ask what was going on, I stood up, scanned the room, and said coldly, "It seems you all aren't very interested in this meal either. Since that's the case, let's part on good terms." My parents went to pick up the car first. Just as I was about to follow, someone suddenly grabbed my arm from behind. When I turned my head, I met Alex's displeased face. He was dressed in a somewhat unconventional way, wearing a white shirt over a black low-cut t-shirt. The 2 newly pierced diamond studs on his sexy collarbone were both trendy and rebellious, just like him. He looked down at me, smirking with a sarcastic smile. "Haven't seen you in a while, and your temper is already flaring up? Didn't you take a long vacation? Where did you find a boyfriend? How old is he? What does he look like? Do I know him?" He bombarded me with a series of highly pressuring questions. Each one seemed to reveal concern. But once I laid everything out, he would blink and mockingly belittle me, saying I wasn't worthy. This has happened many times already. I almost immediately reacted. I shook off his hand and uncontrollably shouted, "It has nothing to do with you." Alex looked at his hand that had been shaken off, somewhat stunned. He stopped smiling. Frowning at me, his expression grew increasingly displeased. Ethan peeked out from behind him. Grinning widely, revealing his sharp little tiger teeth, he asked, "What's up?" Why the big reaction? He usually spoke in a high-pitched voice, making his tone lively and playful. It easily made people feel a sense of closeness. But the words he said were completely opposite to the image he presented. Could it be that my sister really has a lover outside? Wow, isn't having us a few enough? His smile deepened as he stared at me, saying meaningfully, "So promiscuous." Ethan loves to refer to the three of them as my harem. As if I were so debauched, with such a high status, so special. But in our little group of 4, I am the one who has worked hard to fit in with them. There was a time when I would deceive myself. Although they always loved to tease me, belittle me, and often came up with all sorts of tricks to have fun at my expense. But perhaps that's just how boys are. Besides that, they often come to play with me, and when I was bullied, they would help me stand up for myself. After all, we grew up together. I must be different to them, right? It wasn't until that last incident happened that I finally understood. It turned out that all along, I was just a toy they could manipulate at will in their eyes. A clown for their amusement when they were bored. I met Ethan's gaze. The corners of his mouth were still turned up, anticipating my reaction to his already excessive remark that would sting. But I maintained a blank expression as I locked eyes with him for a moment. Then I turned and walked away. I hadn't taken a few steps when suddenly another somewhat indifferent voice called out to me, "When are you coming back to class?" I paused for a moment, not turning back. But in response to this normal inquiry, I at least gave a little reply, "Maybe in a couple of days." Immediately, I heard Ethan click his tongue in displeasure. He deliberately mumbled loudly so I could hear clearly, "No wonder he's been in a relationship before, he only shows him a good face." But, "It's been so long since you broke up, sister, do you still treat him differently?" It's quite ridiculous, isn't it? Among these 3, Ian is clearly the one who resists and despises the idea of our marriage the most. His words are the harshest, saying that I am both stupid and foolish, and he would never marry someone like me. Yet, I did date him. In fact, it was Ian who confessed to me first. Unlike the accumulated wealth of their 3 families over generations, my family only became prosperous later on. To be precise, my father unintentionally seized the opportunity of the times in his early years. From then on, he soared to great heights, breaking into the circle of these 3 prominent families. But this is just the surface. Many people secretly mock my family, saying we are just a flash in the pan nouveau riche, unworthy of being in their circle. Sooner or later, we will return to where we came from. I was young at the time and couldn't stand it, so I rolled up my sleeves and wanted to settle the score with them. It was my dad who stopped me and earnestly told me, if our family wants to truly establish itself, we must build good relationships with this group of people. So, I endured it. I began to pretend to be carefree and easygoing, making an effort to blend in with that group of young masters and misses. Later, I discovered Alex and their special status, and I became like a little shadow, following them around. I followed them from elementary school all the way to middle school. From being excluded and bullied to gradually being accepted by them. All the way to college. Even though I was initially taught by my dad that my intentions were not pure, over the years, I truly came to regard them as my best friends. It wasn't until my dad's investment failed and the stock market plummeted that they suddenly began to neglect and distance themselves from me. In a long period of confusion, I slowly came to understand. It turned out that from the very beginning, our positions in this relationship were never equal. This time, I didn't try to please them anymore. Instead, I went to school as usual and adapted to life without them. Then, I was kidnapped. When surrounded by a group of acquaintances demanding ransom, I was still in a daze. I recognized a few of them as friends I usually got along well with, so it was hard to believe they would choose to target me. I even thought they were joking with me. I laughed and said that if they needed money, I could lend it to them. But they made an outrageous demand, asking for an amount I simply couldn't bear. It was then that I realized they were serious. All the valuable things on me were searched and taken by them. They locked me up for 2 days, without a drop of water. When I heard them anxiously discussing that they dared not directly extort my parents and planned to find someone to sell me, I felt a wave of absurdity and collapse wash over me. It was like seeing a group of children with kitchen knives saying they were going to kill someone. It was funny because of their immature age, yet a sense of crisis suddenly arose from their serious expressions and the sharp knives in their hands. I tried to curl up my body, cursing them like a madman, threatening them with harsh words. But anyone could see my bluster and fear. There was a person inside, named Ryan, who used to be my friend. He squatted down, sighed, and while smiling and reaching out to touch me, he said, "Bella, forgive me. I actually like you a lot, and I don't want to do this." His words were not finished, turning into a scream. I bit down on his finger, my whole body erupting with an unprecedented strength. I was almost going to bite his finger off. The group of people immediately fell into chaos, rushing to stop me. At that moment, the warehouse door opened. A beam of bright light shot in from the surface, gradually illuminating the entire dim, dilapidated warehouse. A tall figure stood at the door, backlit by the light. It was Ian. Ever since I was rescued that day, I had a long period during which I didn't dare to go outside. The betrayal of a friend without warning, the sudden kidnapping and extortion, and being photographed in various humiliating ways, all of these etched dark shadows of pain in my heart, stroke by stroke. My tense spirit was on the verge of collapse. During that time, it was the usually indifferent and harsh Ian who stayed by my side. I had never seen him so gentle and patient, especially towards me. He seems to sense my feelings of collapse and despair. The once reticent him has started to find various topics to chat with me every day. I live in his private apartment. He helped me take care of school breaks, and he concealed it from my parents. He even used his connections to privately deal with Ryan and his group. He found ways to keep Alex and Ethan, who are closest to him, at bay. He ensured that not a single whisper of this matter leaked out. He also made sure that no one disturbed me or touched my scars. Like a cold rain suddenly meeting a spring breeze, evaporating into gentle water vapor. With a silent and nurturing presence, he firmly protects me under his wings. His maturity, steadiness, and reliability gradually opened the tightly closed shell of my heart, making me uncontrollably dependent on him. In the end, I couldn't help it anymore. With a mix of anticipation and anxiety, I asked him, "Why are you so good to me?" He replaced an answer with a rhetorical question. Smiling slightly, he asked me, "Do you want to date me?" It felt as if an arrow had struck the bullseye. I dizzily fell into his rare and exquisitely tempting embrace. I had no reason to shake my head in refusal. Under his care, I slowly shed my shadows and became more cheerful. Looking back now, I still feel a bit dazed. Ian seemed indifferent, but deep down, he was extremely assertive. During the time I was in love with him, Alex was forced to restrain his actions and no longer put his arm around me. Ethan also held back, no longer spouting nonsense to me. Even if I felt a little uncomfortable, he would take it seriously. I was so happy that I was almost in love with him. I even foolishly imagined countless times in my mind what kind of wedding dress I would choose for our future wedding. But he was pretending. He was pretending. Everything he gave me was also fake. I will never forget that day. It was my first time cooking, with hands full of scars and countless failed ingredients. I made a lavish feast, a full 18 dishes. All because Ian said he wanted to eat the food I made with my own hands at the birthday party. But the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, what awaited me was not praise and admiration. Instead, it was laughter. Ridiculous, inexplicable laughter. A group of people mercilessly mocking me. Ethan was laughing so hard he couldn't stand up straight, holding his belly. Alex was smirking while whistling, recording my awkward and bewildered appearance in an apron, holding a spatula. And Ian. He lazily leaned against the door, smiling faintly as he observed everything inside. Like a player with a sure win, he calmly enjoyed the scene of his victory. I never expected our proud and headstrong Miss Sia to have such a virtuous side, ha ha ha. Luckily, our bet is only for a month, otherwise, if this goes on, Ian, she would be willing to bear your children. Ha 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 ha. Ha, interesting, next time it should be my turn to play, right? Alex paused when he said this. He glanced back at me, then shrugged and turned away nonchalantly, smiling as he said, if she heard that, then next time, we need to come up with something new. I stood there for a long, long time. A layer of cold ice took root from the soles of my feet, gradually creeping up my entire body. I found it difficult to swallow, and then I started to tremble. I was uncontrollably shaking slightly. I rolled my eyes silently, looking towards Ian, who stood the farthest away from me. My lips trembled as I opened my mouth. I wanted to ask him, is this true? When I asked you why you were so good to me back then, you avoided answering. So you were waiting for me here all along. But after more than a month of little moments together, didn't you feel even a tiny bit of softness or guilt towards me? Ian and I locked eyes for 3 seconds, the smile fading slightly. Then, he calmly looked away. I slowly closed my mouth. No need to ask any more, no need to humiliate myself further. I understood his answer. I thought I would cry. I thought I would wail and drown them all in my tears, watching them panic and flail about. But I couldn't cry. I couldn't say a word. I just stood there quietly among them, surrounded by laughter that pierced like sharp knives. When they had laughed enough, they slowly stopped. They began to wonder about my strange reaction, as indifferent as death itself. I gently exhaled a breath of murky air. In a hoarse voice that was somewhat unpleasant, I said to them, "Let's break off our friendship." From that day on, I dropped out of school. Soon after, my father's reputation and business took a sharp downturn. But he was unwilling to accept it, always believing he could make a comeback. As a result, our family's situation grew increasingly dire. If it weren't for my mother tightly holding on to a sum of money and forbidding him to touch it, I might not even be able to afford school anymore. We moved out of the wealthy district. I sold all my luxury items, including my motorcycle, piano, and designer watches. Looking at the increasing amount in my account, my anxiety was somewhat alleviated. Besides that, I also had my boyfriend Leo help me persuade my dad. He has good grades and successfully started his own business back in high school. He handles business matters much better than I, the poor student. And asking him for help doesn't weigh on my conscience at all. On the first day back at school, Leo's driver specifically took a detour to pick me up at my new home in the suburbs. I sold my car, but my quality of life hasn't decreased at all. When we arrived at the school gate, Leo gentlemanly opened the car door for me, wanting to help me out. Suddenly, a roaring sound came rushing from afar. After a sharp screech of tires against the ground, Alex drifted and skidded to a stop on his cool black motorcycle, taking off his helmet. With his long legs striding forward, he approached us with a sour expression, staring at the hand Leo was holding mine with. Suddenly, he threw his helmet at us. Leo and I were forced to separate. I hadn't even had time to get angry. Alex instead sneered and asked me, "Is this your so-called new boyfriend? What terrible taste you have. When did you start flirting with him behind our backs?" His tone was so self-righteous. As if I were the one sneaking around behind his back. But who does he think he is to me? I was initially a bit angry and instinctively wanted to retort. But when I caught a glimpse of something slightly unusual in him, I paused to think for a moment. When I lifted my head again, I ignored Alex and looked only at Leo, taking his hand voluntarily. I said in a tender tone, "Let's go, don't mind him, we'll be late for class soon." The two people who had originally been coldly confronting each other suddenly turned their gazes towards me. Leo looked somewhat surprised and immediately smiled. As long as I was a little nicer to him, he would shine with joy. He couldn't help but lean in, wrapping his arm around my shoulder, rubbing my hair and saying, "All right, I'll do whatever you say." Alex's face turned an extreme shade of ugly. Seeing that we were about to leave, he suddenly reached out to grab me. But Leo had already anticipated this and sidestepped to block him, forcefully knocking his hand back. Leo shielded me behind him, looking at him expressionlessly and saying, "What do you want to do to my wife?" "Your wife?" That sharp, almost distorted voice did not come from Alex. I turned my head. I saw Ethan and Ian, who had appeared on the other side at some point. I suddenly realized I probably wouldn't make it to class today. Ethan stepped closer, his sharp gaze sweeping back and forth between me and Leo. He abandoned his usual pretentious sweet boy act. Almost with a hint of sarcasm, he said, "How long have you been dating her to call her your wife? Do you have no shame? Sister, listen to me, a man like that who is so undignified is not worth it. If you really want to find a boyfriend, I can reluctantly lower myself to be your little boyfriend." Leo was almost laughing in anger. He scolded, digging a wall while standing in front of me, "Who exactly is the one without shame?" The two of them started arguing without any grace. The harm was minimal, but it was quite embarrassing. I even saw some college students in the crowd pretending to be nonchalant while secretly raising their phones, full of holes in their act. I really didn't want to see my name appear on the campus confession wall after this little squabble. So I tugged at Leo's shirt, preparing to ask him to leave. Just then, Ian, who had been silent all along, suddenly spoke up. His words were very plain, yet they pierced my heart like a knife. "Bella, as long as you treat me well, you can be with anyone, right?" I wasn't surprised that Ian knew about my story with Leo. In fact, anyone who wanted to find out could easily learn everything, because Leo's pursuit of me was anything but low-key. It could even be described as passionate, fervent, and flamboyant. He is a transfer student who joined our class this semester. Although he is not bad-looking and has a decent build, I didn't pay much attention to him at first. I get along well with my classmates, and I quickly became familiar with him after chatting a few times. Occasionally, we would meet up for a meal and discuss some topics. Until the news of my breakup with Ian spread. On the third day of my leave of absence, he found me in the hospital. Just like Ian, he took meticulous care of me when I was in a terrible mental state. He tried various ways to cheer me up. And unlike Ian, he did not hide his emotions at all. He repeatedly and sincerely expressed his feelings for me and his love at first sight. I quietly observed him for a long time. Finally, after receiving a reply from the private detective I had hired, I agreed to be his girlfriend. The sunlight was so bright it was almost blinding, making one feel a sense of aversion. I came to my senses in a daze. I looked at Ian, who was still waiting for my response. I smiled at him and said, "Yeah, what's wrong? Whoever is useful to me, I will like, of course, except for my ex." I really didn't expect it. The fact that I was dating Leo would have such a big impact on these three people. It seems that from the very beginning, when I said I had a boyfriend, none of them truly believed it. Leo and I made it to the second class. Since there were no good seats left, we had to sit in the front row. As soon as we sat down, Ethan quickly took the empty seat next to me. Shortly after, I heard the creaking of two chairs behind us. Leo was somewhat gritting his teeth, but there was nothing he could do. And so, I completed the entire class in this strange atmosphere of undercurrents swirling around us. During this time, aside from Ethan who couldn't hold back, putting on a pitiful look and asking me, "Sister, are you serious with him?" After not receiving any response from me, he lowered his head in disappointment and bewilderment. The other two managed to keep their composure. So, after school, Leo came over to talk to me, and I nodded. I didn't really hear what he was saying. It was nothing more than mentioning the takeout I love, buying me flowers or little desserts. It didn't matter. I leaned closer to him and, as a reward, pressed a kiss on his cheek. Crash, various pens and books suddenly scattered all over the floor behind us. The chair made a sharp sound. But it felt like we were completely oblivious to the chaos at the center of the storm. I remained indifferent. At the moment I kissed him, Leo's face instantly turned bright red. He didn't notice the commotion around us at all. But he lowered his gaze, staring at my lips, swallowing hard. It seemed he felt unsatisfied. Instinctively, he wanted to lean in and kiss me again, only to end up kissing the back of a hand that clearly belonged to a man. Leo's expression changed drastically, and he stepped back in frustration. Then he looked up and glared. Our gazes met in midair with Alex. It seemed like the sound of electric sparks crackled. In the next moment, both of them stood up simultaneously. Just as it seemed they were about to come to blows, I suddenly called out to him, "Alex." Their movements abruptly halted, and Alex turned to look at me. His eyes surprisingly revealed a hint of expectation. What was he expecting? What did he think I would say? I smiled slightly, looking at him. Slowly, I said, "Even if you drive him away, I still won't choose you as my boyfriend." Alex's expression first froze. Then, as if pricked by a needle, he reacted with an intensity that was almost frightening. He let out a laugh, as if he had heard something amusing. He was utterly speechless yet wanted to mock me. In the end, he angrily snapped at me, "Who do you think you are? What are you? You dare to dream of me being your boyfriend? Don't be so narcissistic, okay? You should look in the mirror and see your own family, the Xie family." He was so angry that he spoke without thinking, biting and attacking wildly. It was as if he had completely lost his composure. Suddenly, Ian gave him an elbow jab, stopping him. Ian looked at me. His face bore a rare heaviness and confusion. He said, "I only have one question." I thought he was about to say something outrageous. I suppressed my smile, frowning as I stared at him. In the end, what Ian asked was, "Why haven't you kissed me?" The words I wanted to retort were on the tip of my tongue. They rolled back down again. I even doubted whether I had misheard. "What?" Ian repeated it again. It was as if he wouldn't give up until he got an answer. "Clearly, I have been with you longer than he has, and I have spent more time with you than he has. Why did you kiss him, yet never took the initiative to kiss me?" The classroom was empty and quiet, with only a few of us left. Ian's question was like a stone thrown to the ground. Everyone was waiting for my answer. But all I wanted to do was sneer. I glanced around, taking in the expressions of the three of them. Then I scoffed. I said, "A complete liar, what face do you have to ask such a question? Have you all forgotten? I already said that we have cut ties." In front of them, I took Leo's hand. In the most impatient tone, just like they had done to me countless times before, "Get lost, don't bother me." Leo held my hand in a reverse grip. Like a victorious rooster, he proudly led me away. As we reached the door, Ethan suddenly shouted, "I never agreed to break up with you. Sister, I admit it was wrong of me to bet and tease you at that time. You can punish me however you want. Please don't be mad at me, and don't go with him, okay?" Ethan's eyes turned red, his expression pitiful. This time it didn't seem like an act. He murmured, "I just realized that I actually like you." But the only response to him was my merciless laughter. I sincerely asked him, "What good is your liking?" "It doesn't surprise me, it only makes me feel disgusted." Ethan looked at me in shock. Tears fell uncontrollably, drop by drop. I had truly regarded him as my own brother. I pampered him and comforted him, even tolerating his offenses as if he were just a child who didn't understand. But he couldn't help himself, time and again. He trampled my sincerity underfoot. After saying that, I walked away without looking back. Sitting in Leo's car, he kept trying to cheer me up. Suddenly, I asked him, "How many days have we been together?" Leo was taken aback for a moment and instinctively replied, "The 29th day." I was already a bit fed up. I just wanted to end it all quickly. So I smiled and said to him, "Then come to my house tomorrow, We'll have been together for a month, we should celebrate a little. Although Leo had never heard of this kind of romantic full moon celebration, he still nodded obediently and expressed a bit anxiously that he needed to hurry and pick out a gift. I said I had prepared a gift for him as well, one that would definitely take him by surprise. Leo pressed for details, but I insisted on keeping it a secret, which only heightened his curiosity and anticipation. The next day, when he arrived at my house and I blindfolded him with a silk ribbon, his breathing slowed, and his Adam's apple bobbed up and down. He tentatively asked, "Wife, the gift you mentioned isn't?" "Shoo, don't guess wildly." I pressed my index finger against his lips, then took his hand and guided him to sit down in a chair. Leo nervously and somewhat helplessly clutched his pant leg, his back straight. He was completely compliant throughout. Even when I asked him to take off his clothes and tied him up with rope, he blushed and complied. He only muttered, "So you like it this way?" His breathing grew heavier, and his body's reactions became more pronounced. Everything was ready. I opened the door, and the sound of footsteps immediately filled the room. Leo became alert and turned his head to ask, "Wife, is there someone else coming in?" In the next moment, the blindfold over his eyes was removed. Leo squinted. Then, his pupils suddenly constricted. He stared in shock at the camera placed in front of him, as well as the 5 burly men who had suddenly appeared in the room. I could no longer show him a smile. With a blank expression, I asked him, "Leo, are you satisfied with the gift I prepared for you?" From the moment he appeared in the hospital, I developed a heavy suspicion towards him. Sure enough, the private detective I hired brought me unexpected information. Leo, whose real name is Alexander, the illegitimate son of the Schaff family, and the brother that Alex is still unaware of. He was originally raised abroad with his mother. But as he grew older, his ambitions became greater. He felt that he was strong enough to completely replace Alex, so he secretly returned to the country. He hated this brother who enjoyed all the resources and wealth as the only son. He hated him, and everything he cherished. Therefore, he followed Alex's gaze and set his sights on me. Although Alex and I completely do not believe that either of us likes the other, to outsiders, Alex's affection for me is painfully obvious. It's like a young boy who has just fallen in love but doesn't know how to express it. The only thing he can think of is to tease the girl he likes, trying everything to get her attention. There are no other methods in his mind. Alexander wants to destroy him, but he is too hard to approach. So he can only take the long way around, first destroying me to make Alex feel pain. This leads to me suddenly enduring an undeserved disaster. If I hadn't later found Ryan, who was hiding from his debts, and forced him to tell the truth, I probably wouldn't have known about Leo's twisted and dark psychology hidden behind others. Why don't you suspect Ian? Clearly, he was the one who benefited in the end. Alexander stopped pretending. He glanced at the group of people around him, forcing himself to stay calm and buy time. He didn't know. Even if the kidnapping incident happened to coincide with the bet made by Ian and the other 3 pranksters. I had never doubted any of them. After all, we grew up together. I still had some understanding of him. Otherwise, if I hated the wrong person, wouldn't that be just what Alexander wanted? Without giving him a chance to delay, I turned and left. The 5 men I hired also began their actions. Alexander panicked immediately, shouting my name and begging for mercy. Asking me not to treat him this way. But he had no choice. Just like I did back then. Soon, a thick stack of photos was developed. I got what I wanted. Although I repay grudges, I am not unreasonable. So I didn't really let those people violate Alexander, but only made them use props. And I took pictures of Alexander's humiliating, tearful expressions one by one. From this moment on, if Alexander wants to have any ulterior motives against me, he must weigh the pile of his private photos in my hands. If they were to be leaked, could he bear the consequences? First, there was a severed friendship, then revenge. After doing all this, I suddenly lost all my strength. I took a week off to be alone at home to recover. Just as I was preparing to go back to school and start a new life, I received a call from my dad. When I opened my eyes again, I was in a luxuriously decorated but dim room with the curtains tightly closed. Waves of heat overwhelmed me, waking me up. I gasped for air, struggling to take off my jacket. Yet, I still felt parched and restless. Sweat soaked my hair as I stared blankly at the ceiling, slowly recalling what had happened before this. Suddenly, the blanket beside me moved. Then a hoarse male voice said, "You're awake?" I was startled, but then I found the voice familiar. Hesitantly, I said, "Alex?" Alex didn't respond. But my breathing was as rapid and heavy as his. Even I, who am usually slow to understand, realized at this moment. We were both drugged and locked in a room together, on the same bed. Who is it? The more I thought about it, the colder my back became. I resisted that answer from the bottom of my heart. It seemed Alex could no longer hold back. He suddenly turned over and pinned me down. His scorching kisses fell haphazardly on my face. While kissing, he impatiently questioned me, "Why didn't you reply to my messages? Why did you block me? Do you really hate me this much?" The things I said to you before were not intentional, I was speaking in sarcasm. I don't want to cut ties with you, not at all. I could no longer bear it and kicked him. But because I was completely exhausted and weak, the kick had no strength at all. I could only curse at him, "Shut up. I don't want to hear it. Stop it. Don't pull my clothes." Alex's movements paused for a moment. It was as if he was caught in a great struggle and conflict. But in the end, his answer to me was, "I'm useful to you, Bella, I will help with your family's company." With what seemed like an important compensation to me, he completely convinced himself. He let desire take over. From then on, my struggles and resistance turned into fuel for passion. In this blazing fire, I sadly realized that the person I once truly liked was actually just this. No one came to save me. The tightly closed door was finally kicked open. The first person to enter was Ian. After seeing the chaotic scene on the bed, he paused for a moment. He turned around to stop others from coming in, but he couldn't stop Ethan. Ethan charged in like a cannonball. He yanked Alex up from the bed and started hitting him. With a fierce expression, he said, "Do you know what you're doing? We agreed on fair competition, and yet you resort to such shameless tactics?" Alex had no words to retort. But after taking a few punches and seeing that Ethan wouldn't stop, he began to fight back, and the two of them started to grapple. I seemed to see nothing, my gaze fixed on Ian, who was still standing at the door. Then I made an effort to raise my hand towards him. Seeing this, Ian finally stopped hesitating. He immediately stepped forward, took off his coat, and wrapped it around me. Gently patting my back, he whispered, it's okay, I'm here." I silently cried in his arms. In a voice only we could hear, I looked at him with a mix of grievance and sadness and said, "The person I like, has always been you. I'm sorry." Ian suddenly tightened his grip on my wrist. His breath was rapid for a few moments, then gradually calmed down. He released my hand but held me even tighter, repeating, "You did nothing wrong, don't apologize to me, you did nothing wrong." By the end, his voice had become somewhat hoarse, as if weighed down by deep regret. "It's me, I understood too late." Ian took me away. He was very visionary, and he brought more people with him. Alex and Ethan couldn't stop him. And my dad, realizing too late, rushed out from the crowd. He didn't understand why he had drugged Alex, only to have Ian take me away. But it didn't matter. Whoever took his daughter would have to pay the price. His company was on the verge of bankruptcy, and he needed someone to help him unconditionally. He was unwilling to accept it, he felt he was still young and could return to the peak, to shine once more. He was shouting loudly from behind, calling my name. But I held on to Ian's neck, leaning against him. I said nothing, only sobbing softly. Tears gradually soaked Ian's collar. I knew he had no way to handle this. sure enough, I didn't need to ask for help. Ian, with a cold expression, ordered the bodyguards to keep my dad firmly restrained. He even had someone call his father, requesting him to take action. It was imperative to do so in the shortest time possible, to ensure my dad went completely bankrupt and never recovered. It was only then that I lifted my head in his arms. My eyes were red, and I choked out to him, "I want to find my mom." Ian looked down at me. The emotion in his eyes was almost overflowing with softness. He kissed my forehead and said softly, "All right, I will help you." Ian found my mother, who had been imprisoned in a private hospital. Her mental state wasn't very good, but fortunately, her physical health was otherwise normal. In some ways, my mother and I are truly cut from the same cloth. It wasn't until now that she was willing to reveal everything to me. It turns out that my previous suspicions were all wrong. Our family's decline actually has nothing to do with the Zhuang, Xiao, or Su families. It was my father who remained stuck in the past, unwilling to accept the changes of the times. He continued to manage the company with outdated methods from over 20 years ago, leading to a worsening business situation. He was troubled in his heart and strayed after drinking. After my mother discovered it, they argued countless times. But for my sake, she kept this matter hidden, hoping he would wake up soon and return to the family. Little did she expect, he became increasingly absurd, even sinking so low as to sell his daughter for personal gain. The awkward blind date was actually his suggestion. After that day, my mother became suspicious. To prevent what I had to do later from being exposed, he found an opportunity to confine my mother in this hospital. At that time, I was overwhelmed with the kidnapping issue. Not wanting my family to worry, I deliberately reduced contact with them. That's how I fell into the trap set by my biological father. Now that things have come to this, my mother has completely seen through it and plans to divorce that scumbag. Ian took me back to his private apartment, claiming that I couldn't be without someone to take care of me. Because he wanted to monopolize me, Ian completely fell out with Alex and Ethan. Their relationship, inseparable since childhood, has turned into one where they resort to fists and kicks at the mere sight of each other. There's really no need for me to say more. Ian hates Alex, hates him to the bone. A vendetta over a stolen wife, an irreconcilable enmity. In fact, after Alex was drugged, he had the chance to turn back and seek help. But he chose to stay with me, until the effects of the drug fully took hold and he could no longer control himself. How innocent the first am. Forced and bullied. I could only curl up in Ian's arms and cry in grievance. A secret hidden for over a decade, now exposed because of this incident. The person I have always liked turns out to be him. With his intelligence, he probably sensed my unusual feelings for Alex, but he couldn't be entirely sure. So when he heard that apology, Ian was both delighted and flustered. He never expected it to be him. What filled my chest was an endless heartache, pity, and guilt for him. He did something that left no room for reconciliation between him and Alex from that moment on. He lent Alexander a hand, allowing him to make a perfect entrance just when Alex was in a daze, being heartlessly condemned by everyone. Now the entire Xiao family was thrown into chaos. Alex's stable position as the heir had, for the first time in over 20 years, begun to waver. Alex was in a state of utter chaos because of this matter. No matter how much he hated it, he couldn't immediately go after Ian. Because there was still a persistent Ethan. Ian hadn't found anything that could seriously harm him for the time being. So he was quite troubled by the constant nagging. I casually comforted him, occasionally giving a few perfunctory kisses. Ian became quiet and satisfied. There was no way to be unsatisfied. I had experienced that kind of coercion. Ian was cautious with me, afraid that I still had psychological scars. So he didn't dare to propose any more excessive displays of affection. While he was dealing with the other two, my mom had completed the divorce procedures and had already gone abroad at my arrangement. The day I decided to leave. After thinking it over, I still left a gift for Ian. An ordinary pen, with no special meaning, to be honest. Perhaps its purpose is to remind Ian from time to time of the beauty of the time we once shared, making it hard for him to easily walk away from those memories. He had actually fallen for me a long time ago. I only realized this later, but unfortunately, he couldn't see it himself. By the time I discovered it, he had already deceived me and crushed my feelings for him in the process. The dawn breaks, the sky is clear, today is a good day. I landed on the other side of the ocean and opened my phone. It showed over 70 missed calls from Ian and more than 100 messages. I never would have guessed he could be so relentless. Just a moment's pause. Ian's call came in again. Without hesitation, I blocked him and turned off my phone, pulling out the SIM card and throwing it away. I looked up, and in the distance, my mother was already waving at me. I hurried towards her, dragging my luggage. From now on, my new life officially begins.